My mentor, who's a great mentor, he's been my mentor for about 3 years now. He has a saying that says, "Stop building your castle on somebody else's sand." Right? And I kept building a nice castle. I like my castle, but it wasn't my sand. So if that beach ever went away or it got washed away, that castle of mine is no longer there, and I'm dependent on that.
All right. Junior, thanks for coming, man.
Thank you for inviting me, Rob.
It's nice to have you in. Outside of Texas. That was a lot of fun. Junior and I were just with honestly, with Kerm and Toby, we were just in Texas having a good time. So Junior, I want to get started talking a little bit about your professional background. And the way I always look at my professional background is first real job.
Yep.
So I'd like to hear about your first real job, whether it was right at college, outside of college, how that took you to Toyota's R&D, and then how that took you to Anziani Tech.
Yeah, so, I mean, my first real job was McDonald's. As much as people would say, you know, you were in high school, you're 16 years old, it's not a real job, you learn a lot there, right? So I was 17 at the McDonald's on Pelham Street, you guys might know of it, and I was a manager at 17. And everybody that worked there was way older than me. You're talking about 40 years old, 50 years old, right? So imagine this little 17-year-old who just got a position that's like, Jocelyn Hafer, I'm the manager, right? I got the keys.
You started off as the manager?
No, I started off at the drive-thru window.
At what age?
16, 15 and a half, 16.
Okay, so a year and a half, you became manager.
You became a shift manager, is what they call it, right? So you do schedules, you order stuff, you know, you bring money to the bank. It's the first time you go and count a register at 17 and then have to drive it down to the bank, right? It's a big responsibility at that time. So that's why I consider it a real job. It's also the place I learned where, like, if you're late, if you don't have uniform, all that, you're gonna get sent home and that affects your pocket, right? I used to get sent home because you're a little bit irresponsible at that time. And then all of a sudden you show up late to your shift, they're like, we don't need you, go home. And that's when you start to learn, like, okay, this is not just a game. It's not just, you know, whatever I make an hourly. It's people are relying on you. People get upset if you don't show up and you're not responsible. And that's why I consider it my first real job. Other people won't consider it, but
I agree. That sounds like a very real job. And so then you went to college and you left McDonald's?
Yeah, so that's the fun part about going to college, right? A lot of people in our area go to college. Sometimes they don't. But the fun part of going to college is the people you meet. And when I lived here, I always wanted to work at Geek Squad. I don't know what it was. I was fascinated with Geek Squad. It's like you could go work on computers. They sell equipment, all that good stuff. I applied here to the Salem Geek Squad probably like 10 times. Never got a call back. So I'm in college one day, I'm in my computer science class, I'm talking to this kid that's my partner on a project, and I'm like, dude, I just want to work at, I want to work at Geek Squad. I keep going back home on the weekends, and when I go home, I work at McDonald's, and then I can't really enjoy college life. So he's like, wait, don't worry, give me a second. He makes a call. He's like, they're going to call you later for an interview. I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, the one in Danvers, are you okay with it? I'm like, yeah, because I went to Salem State, so Danvers was down the street. He's like, yeah. Literally that same afternoon, a couple hours later, they called me, they brought me in for an interview, and I had a job. I'm like, what just happened? I've applied so many times.
You know someone.
And now you know someone. So that's where I first started learning about the power of relationships. And I was like, okay, this can get me somewhere. And that just brought me on the trajectory to get to a Toyota, right? Because from there, and you can stop me whenever you want, but from there I went Geek Squad, met the manager there. We worked together for a year. She left to go to Microsoft. And this is at the Burlington Mall. And then she called me and she's like, you are great. I like working with you. Come work for me at Microsoft.
What year is this?
2013, 2014.
Cool.
So we're talking 10 plus years ago.
Yep. That was around the time, actually, I'm celebrating my 10-year anniversary of starting my first real job this month. So 2014, October, around the same time. Cool.
Yeah. So, and these are all, this is why I consider all of them real jobs, right? Because I told you about McDonald's. Best Buy was power relationships, how you get in there, how you meet people, and then how you cultivate more relationships, like with that manager. Then she left to Microsoft, called me, and this was the first crossroads now, right? Because at Best Buy and at McDonald's, they were part-time jobs. This job required me to come in full-time, and I was still in college.
Love that. What year?
2014.
Junior year
This
of college?
is my sophomore year of college.
You went full-time your sophomore year?
My sophomore year.
40 hours a week?
40 hours a week, sometimes 50.
And you did that sophomore, junior, senior year?
Sophomore, junior, and then I stopped going to college.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, sir.
Very cool.
Yes, sir.
You missed out on a little bit of college working full time.
Yes and no. I feel like I lived a lot
Yep.
during my college days. I still hung out with people I would hang out with normally. It's just that during the downtime that everybody has, instead of playing video games, I was working a 40-hour job. And given it's retail, the schedule's super flexible.
Sure.
Afternoon,
Makes sense.
morning. The hard times are like Thanksgiving and Black Friday. Those are tough days.
That's very cool. What was your role at Microsoft, and then how did that transition? Have you always been in the information tech space?
Yeah. So at Microsoft, I was a service advisor. I sat in the back. Anybody who had a computer issue, they'd bring it to what they called the answer desk at that point. We'd solve virus, what my word isn't working, things of that nature. So I was always people-facing, helping with computers, but it was always on a consumer base, right? And it was retail still, so when we didn't have that, I was selling on the floor.
Yep. And then your job got way more complicated when you went to, what's the name of the Toyota enterprise?
So before there, so I did go to Toyota Research Institute,
Yeah.
but before there, I went to my first corporate job, which people will consider the first real job, and that was at Systems and Technology Research. That's in Woburn.
Yep.
When I started there, I think I was employed at number 30, 35.
Yeah.
So that was a small research and development company, and I was there for about 5 years, roughly. That was a great beginning because you go from the retail stores, crazy hours, to a 9 to 5,
Yep.
right? And you're in an office.
And I want to talk about this company. What was the name of the company again?
Systems and Technology Research.
So this company, according to a previous conversation we had, if you're open to talking about it,
Yeah.
it was an employee-owned S Corp.
Still is.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
For those of you guys who don't know, S Corps are one of the two types of main entities in the U.S., corporate entities. And the interesting thing about S Corps, these are generally smaller businesses.
Yep.
They're limited to 100 owners. They're what we call pass-through entities. So they don't pay any taxes on the profits they keep. They pass that over to their investors, essentially, their owners, and then they pay their taxes. Most large companies are C Corps for a number of reasons, but the big one being everybody wants to go public, and you can't even start that journey of going public until you bring on investors. And if you're limited to 100 individuals that can own the business, you basically can't bring in one investment firm, private equity or whatnot, because those are usually a lot of people. So this S Corp decided, the ownership, the people who started it, decided we're going to create an S Corp. We're going to have it be employee owned. And then to your point, it really was based on when you were hired, because once employee 101 was hired, that person couldn't have ownership. All the other ones have ownership, but that person couldn't.
Yep.
Unless someone left, and now they could acquire ownership because now there's an open spot.
Yeah, there was always a list too. Who was next in line for the
There's a
ownership.
wait list.
Yep.
Tell us about that. What was the philosophy for that business owner? Why would they do that?
So this is why it's very interesting to understand where these owners come from, right? They worked for a smaller company before. That company got acquired by a big research firm. And what happened when they got acquired was the CEO stayed on, and the CEO stayed on for X amount of years. And after that, it went back to the new company's culture. Things weren't the same.
Sure.
It's not the same freedom. So it was actually 5 owners, right? And they all said, you know what, we're going to go start our own. They had a non-compete. They had to wait X amount of years. I think it was 2 years for their non-compete. But then they went and started their own company. And when they started, they said, we don't want to be acquired. And that's how we're going to structure this. And anybody we bring with us is going to be owner in this so that, they all have say in what happens with this company and
That's
how
awesome.
it grows.
You know, when they say start with the end in mind, have you heard that phrase?
Yeah,
Do you know what that means in business?
You always have to know what your end goal is. What's the big picture?
What's the exit?
Yeah.
That's what it really means. Like, at what point in time are you going to sell this business or step away from this business or close this business? Because most businesses don't last hundreds of years, right? And that's a very interesting exit strategy. At some point in time, we're going to want to leave, retire, whatever you want to call it, and we'll just leave it to the team. We'll just leave the business to the team. There was a company who did this. I don't know if it was Sullivan Tire. It was one of the local tire companies that got pretty big, but that started in Massachusetts. And in the last 24 months, maybe even sooner, I can't recall. If somebody could look it up, that'd be great. They literally decided to retire, the family that owned it, and they sold all of their equity stake back to their employees. And they worked with M&T, who financed the deal. So M&T basically gave all the employees a loan to be able to buy this company from the family. Yeah. And then the family covered the difference in seller financing. So instead of selling it to private equity or a larger company or a national company in the tire space, they just said, nah, we're going to leave it to our people. They'll pay us fair market value, maybe less than what private equity would pay us, but we're much happier with Sullivan Tire. So 100% owned by the workforce.
Yep.
This is becoming more and more popular. I love this idea. I think that you made out on it, right? You had equity?
100%.
Tell me about that. Did you have to ever buy in the equity? They paid you via equity?
Yeah, so I got options.
Yeah.
And whatever the options were worth at that point, because let me go back a little bit.
Yep.
So the plan was structured, you could pick what you wanted. You could pick cash bonus, you could pick stocks, or you could pick options. I ended up doing a 50-50 split because I'm young, I wanted money, I wanted to live.
Yeah.
So I got 50 cash and the rest were options.
Yeah.
And the reason I did options was I didn't have to buy them. So whatever the value was when I got them, that's the value. And when I left and exited, you'd expect the company to be doing better, so they're worth, and I got the difference.
Yep.
So I made out. Once I left, I've never left a job where I'm like, here's a bonus for leaving. I'm like, what?
You know why?
No.
When you have a job, you have, and I'll use some accounting terms, you have a profit and loss statement. Okay? That means you have revenue that comes in via wages. Then you have your ordinary expenses. Then hopefully you have a surplus. Most people have a deficit. When you have a job, you have income. When you build a company, you have income and you're building an asset. So you have the balance sheet too.
Yeah.
And so in this case, this was a company that was traditionally a job that gave you both. It gave you income and ownership. And the beautiful thing about it is when you leave a job, you leave with a ton of resources, everything you've learned, the network you've made, but you generally leave, if you're lucky, with a bonus or a severance or, when you leave a company that you've built or that you've helped build with equity in it, you always leave with a payout.
Oh, yeah.
If the business is doing well. And that's a really cool concept that most people don't understand.
It's actually, I think I've talked to you about this before. That's how I want to structure what I'm doing now.
Sure.
Because it was so valuable at that point.
It was influential.
I want to give it back. Why not give it back? It worked for the owners. They're still there.
Yep.
And then the employees just work, harder because they own it. It's theirs as well. And you want to build something, you don't want to build it by yourself. If somebody's helping you build from the ground up, they should have some stake in the game as well.
That's awesome. And I imagine your options were based on your compensation and your tenure, things like that. And then I imagine you got hit with a pretty cool tax bill on the way out.
Yes, I did.
Because you just got all this money all at once.
And I spent it, so I didn't save any money because you're young. And
Did the company buy your shares?
Yes.
Yes,
They
so
bought
they
it back
redeemed
up.
it.
Yep.
Which also takes a reasonable amount of liquidity. The company has to have cash on hand at all times
In case
just for
anyone needs it.
redemption. Yep. And not in case. When you have 100 owners, people are leaving.
Yep.
It's just a matter of when, how often, how many.
Yeah, I got to a point as well that they started offering a program where if you want to just cash in on it, they'd allow you to do it. You could take, hey, I want to sell you back X amount of shares, and they'll let you do it.
And the cool thing about it is if someone does it, everyone else's ownership value increases. Because by taking shares off the table, the existing shares increase in value.
Yep.
Very cool. I don't know if you know this, but we do something very similar here at a much smaller scale. We're 3 partners now. We used to be 6. The 3 got bought out. And we will probably expand to 3 again. We believe in skin in the game. I always have. Now, I want to talk about Anziani Technologies.
Yes.
So you worked corporate for almost 10 years, essentially?
A little bit over 10 years, yeah.
With McDonald's especially, which is a corporate environment.
yeah.
It doesn't get better than McDonald's.
Listen, when you got to go get your serve safe, if anybody knows what that is, and you have to go to that corporate building and take a test, you get into a corporate environment.
Yep. And then you decided, okay, I'm tired of this.
Yeah.
And I want to launch my own thing.
It started a few years ago, right? So we talked about STR. From there, I went to Raytheon.
What? Oh, okay, yep.
Raytheon was 1 year. It was a large firm. I was just like, this is not for me.
Yep.
I like to innovate. I like to grow, especially when you're in a small environment. Think about it. STR, or Systems Technology Research, it was 30 employees. I left at 600.
Cool.
You know what I'm talking about? I went to Florida. I went to Washington, D.C. I went all over Ohio, opening up offices for these places. I went from help desk to a senior admin there. And then you go to Raytheon, that's very structured, very huge corporation, and you have to stay in line. Something that took 2 weeks at STR took 6 months at Raytheon.
Yep.
And then I went to Toyota because it was 1 year at Raytheon, and I'm like, I don't want this.
And it wasn't Toyota. It was
Toyota Research Institute.
Tell us about that.
It was very interesting. I said no 3 times when the recruiter reached out to me.
Yep.
Because 1, I had the experience with Raytheon. I was like, I don't want a big corp. And 2, it was in Boston. It was the first time that they said commute to Boston.
Yeah.
And it just happened at a good time, right? I was really tired of Raytheon, and I went to Toyota Research Institute. And Toyota Research Institute is its own company, about 250 employees.
Like a subsidiary.
A subsidiary, yeah. And it's fully funded by Toyota. Motor Corp. So the CEO of TRI is the chief scientist of Toyota.
Cool. So this is a separate legal entity. Toyota, the manufacturing company that builds cars, cuts a check to this research institute. That is assumably all of their revenues.
Yep. We don't sell a product, or they don't sell a product. They don't sell any of their research. They just publish and they write as many patents as they can.
Yep. For Toyota manufacturing.
Yep.
Very cool. I would love to see that profit and loss statement, but unfortunately, that's probably not going to get in my hands. And how long were you there?
5 years.
What was your primary day-to-day?
So
what were you responsible for?
I started as a senior systems administrator, and about a year in, I became a staff.
Tell us dummies what that means.
So as a senior systems administrator, we're responsible for all the infrastructure, the laptops, the servers that run it, any new compute, the internet, anything that touches it from the customer side, which is the employees there, all the way to the server side, we touched. And it was a small team.
And essentially developing that level of IP that I imagine, intellectual property that I imagine is very valuable to a company like Toyota. I imagine security played a big part.
Oh, think about this, right? Researchers do what they do. They're great at what they do, but they don't know what computers they need. They don't know what the latest processing power is. They don't know what type of network speeds they need. They just know that they have to be bleeding edge. And as they try to push the envelope, as an IT person, you have to push the envelope. You can't use the same hardware you were using 6 months ago because you're slowing them down.
You've given me that the hard way. I like to think about it real simple. My computer better be just as fast as my brain. If not, we got issues.
If you're waiting on your computer, then there's
big issues. And these were all scientists, essentially. All your employees were scientists.
Scientists. Most of them were professors at Harvard, MIT. Same thing with STR. I've always worked with professors, essentially, that did this for fun. This was their side hustle.
Good for them. Good for them. And when did the idea to start Anziani Tech form?
If I told you it was my idea, I'd be lying to you. It was literally my daughter was just born, and we were doing her newborn photo shoot like you normally do. And our photographer, who's a good friend of mine, came over and he's like, my sister has this law firm that really could use your help. They need an IT person. Would you think about doing this on the side? And I was like, no, I have a full-time job, new kids. He's like, just talk to her. And I talked to her and I went in there and I was like, okay, you know what? I'll do it for X amount an hour. I won't tell you how much because it's kind of embarrassing at this point.
That's how we all start.
I was like, I'll do it for X amount an hour and that's going to take me 5 hours just because I know what I know. And they were like, yeah, fine. And then we started that relationship and I started making some money doing it.
You were like, that was too easy.
Yeah, it was way too easy. I'm like, And then I started looking around. I'm like, there's not a lot of people that do this here. But I still never took it serious because I was in a really high position. It's like, how do you replace that salary with this type of work? And then about a year and a half ago, traumatic experience with the family happened. And then I said, you know what? I got to build something that I own that's ours. My mentor, who's a great mentor, he's been my mentor for about 3 years now. He has a saying that says, stop building your castle on somebody else's sand. Right? And I kept building a nice castle. I like my castle. But it wasn't my sand. So if that beach ever went away or it got washed away, that castle of mine is no longer there. And I'm dependent on that. And after this, family event happened, I said, you know what? I'm going to take it serious. I have a few people I'm doing this for. I'm going to get serious about this and learn how to do it better. And I started reading a couple books. And once I read the books, I learned how to package profit. It was one of the books I read. And I learned how to put my numbers together, what it made. I looked into industry, what industry looked like. And I said, okay, this is where we're going to start. And then from there, I said, I'm going to do this full time. Once I get to a certain number, my wife was on board. We got to that number and it's like, okay, let's go full time now.
Awesome. And that's basically been like the last 18 months, give or take?
Yeah, that's been the last 18 months that we've been going after this.
A couple of things that I love that you just said. Don't build somebody's castle on somebody else's. Don't build your castle on somebody else's sand. You know what came to mind right away? That's the biggest, I don't know if you guys know, but the biggest risk industry-wise for starting a new business is the hospitality business, restaurants. And that is why, typically. If you look at businesses that can sell product from a food perspective, that do really well on a sales capacity, one of the main reasons they fail is because they don't own the building.
They're there.
And the landlord has control. They dictate. Once you're making $50K, $100K, $200K a month in sales somewhere, that landlord could just double your rent. And if you don't want to take that, or if your business can't handle the financials, gone. So that's a big one. I think, and that applies to so many different areas, depending on industry, depending on, margin, for you is so much different, but that comes to mind. I see a lot of businesses fail because of that, because of rent.
Yeah.
The other thing you said that I want to talk about further, because I think perhaps you may be having some difficulty, depending on target markets, is how do you replace that salary with this type of work? I really want to hone in on this type of work.
Yep.
So let's talk about the products that you currently offer to the marketplace. There's 4, if I remember correctly.
There's 4, yep. So the first one right now, that's like kind of our bread and butter that we build our base on, is managed IT services.
Yep.
So essentially we come in with your IT department if you're a small company,
Yep.
or we do co-managed IT where we augment your IT department because you guys either have projects you can't get to and we'll get to them. So that's kind of our bread and butter.
Which I love, by the way.
Yeah.
Being a client.
So thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
It's the best.
So from there, we go to IT consulting. It's a little bit different than the managed services because this is specifically you bring us in either for a project, an assessment, or something specific that you want us to look at, not look at your business holistically. Whereas a managed IT, I'm in your business. I can see where your opportunity zones are and help amplify those for you. So that's the second one.
Yep.
After that, we do our network. Being a network engineer is a lot of fun. You get to do different types of network for different type of businesses. Like I've done.
Give us an example of what you would do under network engineering.
Yeah. So, well, one, it's security, cybersecurity protection. That's the first layer that we do.
Yep.
Where we'll assess you, we'll create your perimeter, as it's called in the network, and make sure you're secure there. Yep. And then we do security in layers on your network. So your firewall, your switches have a certain layer of security, and then your endpoints, which is your laptops, your computers, have another layer of security. So, security in layers is what we call it.
Yep.
So that's fun on the network side because one, it's physical, you get to do the firewall, but it's also mentally challenging to say what needs to talk to what services should be on here, what services shouldn't be on there, which doesn't sound crazy, but if you think about the people that have what we call a flat network, which means everything's on the same exact network. Comcast or Verizon comes in, puts your modem down, and then you just plug everything in there. There's devices that are calling back home, and what we call back home is the manufacturer. So if you buy something that says made in China and it's a connected Internet of Things device, that device is phoning home to either get updates, to say, here's the diagnostics, here's this, here's that. All that information is your information.
I imagine people can intercept those calls, if you will.
100%. And not just intercept it, it's those devices are typically insecure because they don't have any layers of security because they have minimal processing power. And what happens with that is people take advantage of your weakest link.
Sure.
And wherever your weakest link is, they can get into your network. And once they get into your network, that's where the exploit really happens.
That's how hacking works, if you will.
Yeah, yep. So it's very important to have a very secure network, which is why network is like one of our pillars.
Yeah. And what's the fourth?
The fourth one is automation. This is actually my favorite one. I'm very, very into this one. It's the hardest one to sell, to be 100% honest with you, but it's the one that brings the most value to companies.
Give us an example.
So for example, right now we're working with a different company. They are doing everything by hand on paper. That company now is going to go and grab iPads, automate that whole process that they had on paper, and they're going to be able to, one, alleviate staff, so have less staff doing the back of house work, and they can allow them to do other more important work that's going to bring them up in their career. But also, think about this, right? You go into a customer, a tech that you're just training is writing down the prices by hand. Then they're sending that back as a picture to a back office. That back office has to say, hey, this that was written, what does it say? What number was that? What time did you do this? Versus having that all on an iPad and a piece of software that the tech goes click, 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 can I get your credit card scanned?
So we're talking about sales automation, I imagine purchase order, inventory automation.
Yep.
That's excellent.
So that's one of those automations. The other automation that I'm very excited about, hopefully it comes out soon, we took a business that does photography. We took their biggest cost center and made that a profit center.
Let me try to guess what a photography business, I mean, besides personnel and hardware, what expenses? Occupancy.
Storage.
How equipment storage?
No, how big are your files? Your video files, your picture
digital
files.
storage.
So think about your digital footprint and your digital storage. So if you're a company that's using 50 terabytes of space, right, and you think you're going to go to 100, and you're paying licensing on that,
you're getting smoked.
You're getting smoked. That's your bottom line is getting hit by the storage of that, and you don't want to lose that Because if the client never calls you back, you need it.
Yeah, that's your IP. That's what you have. That's the value. And most clients, I imagine, expect you to store that in perpetuity.
Yeah, because they'll call you in 3 years and say, hey, remember that video from last time?
Out of curiosity, how'd you pivot? Did you teach them how to sell that to the client?
Yeah, so what we did was not just sell it to the client. We said, here's what you're going to do, right? Your SOP is going to change now.
Yep.
Your standard operating procedure.
Yep.
You're going to take this. Anytime you sell a new client, you're going to say, we will store it for X amount of time.
Yep.
But if you want us to maintain these images, we charge you X amount a month.
Makes sense.
I'm a reseller of all these products, so I just got them on my reseller account.
Yep.
And now we have this agreement where I will sell them the licenses at a discounted price.
Yep.
They're going to resell it to their clients at a discounted price. But now that cost center they had is making them
now
money.
it's revenue.
Think about that. You just took your biggest cost center and moved it to...
Beautiful. You know, I see automation. So I want to talk about each product separately.
Yep.
And then I want to spend some time talking about AI's influence on each product separately. I have my own opinions on a business this size developing 4 products and losing a little bit of focus. But to be honest with you, I see 3 products: managed IT services, network engineering, and automation. And IT consulting really layers in depending on how deep someone has to go in each product, right? Because what you just said is consulting to me, not automation. You're talking to this business owner about their biggest cost center and how to transition that to a profit center.
Yep. And then so the reason I call it automation is because what happens in the back end is all automated.
Of course. Yep. But I don't see that so much as you influencing automation as much as you consulting this business owner on how to run a better business with the information that you understand about IT, data, infrastructure, et cetera. And by the way, do you know which one my favorite business is?
I don't.
IT consulting.
That's my favorite business.
It's the IP. Well, you know, I'm no expert on a lot of industries. I'd like to think I'm some sort of expert on professional services, just because I've been in the space for 10 years. You know, I've been FINRA licensed, which means I have my brokerage license, which takes a lot. You have to understand compliance, licensing, et cetera. I've given financial advice legally for 10 years. That takes a lot. So I feel good about that space. And what that is really knowledge-based practice. Yep. So all professional services means I know something that most people don't. And because of that value exchange, they're willing to pay me for it.
Yeah.
So that's why I I have a bias to IT consulting. You know things that most people, including myself, don't and will likely never know. And honestly, I just like to leverage your expertise.
Yep.
We do that. You can't run a large business, and by large I mean more than $500,000 a year without leveraging other people's experience
100%.
and expertise. So I like that one a lot, not because I understand it the most, though I know there's a bias there, but because I feel like it's the one that's going to do most good for people.
Yep.
That photographer, I bet you got a ton of value from your relationship.
Yep.
And I bet you they will for a long period of time. If they were just reaching out to you because they needed managed services, it would kind of be a pain. That's a cost center to that person, right? So it's like, now I got to pay you to make sure my stuff's secure. I get it, and I need to do that, but I don't really want to.
Exactly.
As opposed to, oh my God, you just found this amazing solution and this kind of big problem I had.
Yep.
And now you can do both. And now they don't even mind paying for the managed services.
No, and so we start in managed services because once we get in the nitty gritty of what the business does, who's who in the business, you start to see this. What we do find it's hard to sell sometimes. Like, hey, I can make you more efficient. Yes, it's going to cost for what I know.
Yeah.
But once you get to that line, are you willing to pay that to make, let's say, 10x on your business, right?
You know what I found? So we had the same issue as it relates to bookkeeping and accounting. At the time, 5 years ago, we were doing tax really well. We've been doing tax since 2005. We were doing payroll reasonably well. Payroll is such a commodity. I don't love that business. We can talk about it, and we weren't really doing bookkeeping, accounting, or let alone controller services, CFO services. And people didn't see the value in paying for it. Mm-hmm. They're like, so you're telling me I just got to pay all this money to get all this data just to file my tax return? Like, let's just find a faster way. Let's Mickey Mouse the tax return. And one thing I found value in, and obviously I built this into our SOPs, and I recommend you do the same. During our scoping exercise, I don't charge anything. Mm-hmm. That's crazy. I used to charge, but that's a paywall. And a paywall is a barrier to entry. So now people don't even want to start. So now I don't charge anything. And in some cases, we do scoping exercises that would normally bill $5,000, $10,000. Mm-hmm. And we don't bill anything. But what that allows us to do is, one, we get some skin in the game.
Yep.
Now the client's invested into our process. And then they get to see our results before buying it. Initial results. What that means for our clients is, well, I'm going to show you how you're banking, what your transaction volume looks like, how many checks you're writing. I'm going to show you where your money's going. I bet you nobody's ever shown you that before.
Yeah. Yep.
And then once they see that, it's almost like now they have something to associate to value, because what most clients see is price,
Yep.
but they don't understand value. And when there's price and no value, that's just something that's expensive that you don't want.
Yeah, and that's exactly the same thing with what we do for our services. It's where's the value add outside of just making sure your computer doesn't have a virus and all that. And it comes with the experience and knowledge of, we're going to be able to do this faster. We're going to be more efficient. And on top of that, we're going to make you more efficient. And if we do our job right, you should never hear from us. And if you are hearing from us all the time, it's probably something wrong.
And that's a tough thing for small business owners to swallow. So when I think about your business, IT managed services, I think makes a ton of sense and fits really well for people who have over 25 headcount.
100%.
They have over 25 people. They have all this, 50,000, 100,000 of equipment outstanding between servers and laptops. They want to make sure that's protected. They're hiring, they're firing, so they have equipment shifting. They have security concerns with the hiring, firing.
They have seasons. They need some training. They need cybersecurity assessments. They need insurance cybersecurity assessments.
And then right there with network engineering with those same clients, right? And I imagine tech stack, where does that fall for you?
Which tech stack?
Company's tech stack.
It's in the managed IT services.
Okay, that makes sense. So as businesses grow bigger, that makes more and more sense to develop that cost center. But when they're small, I bet that's a hard bullet to bite.
When they're small, there are companies that want to do it. They end up costing more. And it's for a simple reason. It's not the money. It's processes.
Yep.
Smaller companies don't have processes. They don't have a chain of command. They don't have a management. They don't even have, I don't know, it's escaping me right now, but they don't have a chain of command essentially, right? So because of that, everybody runs wild in that business. It's the Wild West. So somebody will call about the smallest thing and waste time essentially.
Sure.
It is a time waste, and I don't want to say it in a bad way,
Yep.
but it's a waste of time because it's something that by the time you get to it, if you called me and in 10 minutes I call back and it's already fixed, it should have never been a call in the first place.
Correct. So people not knowing how to use the product too.
Yep.
Interesting. For similar reasons, we have 4 tiers in our accounting business. And really tiers 3 and 4 are early set tiers. They're bookkeeping tiers, whether it be on a monthly basis or an annual basis. We just need to get at some point on a cash basis your profit and loss statement together, your balance sheet together to know what the business is doing. And we reserve that for smaller businesses. But by us having those tiers, I've been talking to a few key members, senior members of my team who are really developing out the CFO services business. And they're like, sometimes we talk and they're like, we should get rid of the bookkeeping. It's kind of a distraction.
Yeah.
And for me, I would never do it for a number of reasons. One, people need access to this stuff so they can build better businesses.
Yep.
You'd be surprised what you can do with someone with 12 months of bookkeeping and an hour of advisory to say, hey, I think you're underpriced 18%, and here's why. And if you just increase your prices 18%, you'd run a better business, and I don't think anybody would bat an eye.
I think we just had this conversation, right?
Yep, and that's valuable.
Yeah.
And the way I tell it to my guys, I love that my team argues with me, and that's why I think we innovate, is what you're doing when you're saying no to 50 bookkeeping clients is you're also saying no to 5 CFO clients. Because businesses grow, not all of them, but some of them do, a minority. And those are the clients that I want to service from a CFO perspective. I'd rather see a small business like JMS, who we took on in 2021, and we just did a podcast with, who literally since the podcast has so much sales coming in that we're hiring faster than we ever imagined. They were just a bookkeeping client that we would have said no to, and that's crazy to me. So when I think about your business, we engaged at the end of last year.
At the end of last year. On a bookkeeping.
You were talking to Alex.
Yep.
You were doing your tax return. He was like, hey, I want to introduce you to Rob. He's, Anziani has a business, Junior has a business, and I think he could use bookkeeping services. So we said, cool. We put you in tier 4 at the time, which I think is cost effective, reasonable, and you get to know, where you're invoicing out of, what your P&L looks like, et cetera. But then since then, you joined us in our space, and we're a member of our co-work for a while.
Yes.
And we got to know each other a little bit better. We hired you for our IT services, one of the best decisions we ever made. especially as we're growing and scaling now. We're about to take our headcount to 27 people, which when I joined in 2019, it was really 7 full-time. So it's really cool to see that. And we've gone up to as much as 40, and now we're back down to 27. And I think growing in the right way. And now I'm very interested in helping you grow your business because I feel like I understand your industry better.
Yep.
If you were to, looking at these 4 products, if you were to put them in order of relevance of purchase, what are people going to buy first? Likely, second, third? How does that order look like? For you?
Yeah, so I know for sure 4th is automation. People don't see the value right away in those. The first one that we're actually going after right now is managed IT services. It's known. There's a lot of MSPs out there that manage service providers. It's not just us, but we could just do it better.
Yeah.
So that's our first one right now is we're going out there, we're building lists, we're looking for clients, and we're going to tell them how we're better than what they currently have.
Yeah.
And it's all about timing. Same way we met you guys, it was all about timing. We were ready for bookkeeping, and you guys were ready to make a change.
And when I hear you say better, as a client, what that means to me is you're more qualified than most people out there. That's just a reality. Yep. And it's personalized. I feel like, and keep in mind, I think I'm a client of 2 to 3 of these products. Mm-hmm. So perhaps I get more time and attention. But I feel like I have direct access to you. I feel like we talk about things that drive the business forward. Yep. I feel like I have a better handle around my budget and cash flow needs. It just feels like a great relationship to me relative to everything I've ever had, including when I was in a corporate environment and we had someone on staff who was IT.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what the big difference is. I come from corporate.
Yeah.
I don't come from an MSP. A lot of managed service providers are typically techs who work managed service, and then they say, I could do it better than the owner, and then they go start their own firm. Yep. Where I came from a different perspective of, I worked in research my whole life. Yeah. If you think about it, I've always worked innovating, thinking about new ideas, how can I push the boundaries. Failure was okay. In most businesses, especially MSPs, failure is not okay because if you fail at something, your client gets mad and that's a client you lose. Where in corporate, we were challenged every day, hey, go implement this new product, see how we can be better. And then if it doesn't work, scrap it.
Yeah.
You know, that's what happens when you work with big budgets.
Yeah.
So when I came into the MSP game, I have that mentality. The same thing we do with you. Sometimes it doesn't work to my advantage. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do all this because I'm going to show you guys what it's worth. Yeah. And then later you will find the value on it.
I think that's the way to sell, by the way.
Yeah.
We'll get to that. But that's why I give so much free value out. Because how can you ask someone to pay a price until they understand what they're getting?
Yep.
And you and I both work in very technical spaces, which to me in layman's terms means most people don't understand what we do.
Yep.
And it's our job to help them understand. How can we do that until we show them?
Yep.
So, you know Gary Vaynerchuk?
I do not.
Gary V? He is a genius marketer, probably one of the best of our time. And he talks about jab, jab, left hook. That's a book of his, philosophy of his. And what it means is give free service, give free service, give free service, then ask.
Yep.
Right? Don't just come in and ask for someone's business. Show them what your business is to begin with, because everybody's asking them for their business. If you're an entrepreneur, everyone's asking you to buy something from them. But very few people show up and say, hey, here's what I have to offer, and here's what it looks like for you. And not just like in a 15-minute pitch, but over weeks with data. And then after you feel like you've helped them enough, say, hey, I'd like for you to become a client of mine.
Yep. Yeah. And that's what we call the free IT consultations. The problem I have sometimes.
Don't use the word free.
It's exactly. You have to assign value to it because once you say it's free, everybody's going to say, well, you did it for free last time.
Yeah, so it's not worth anything.
Yep.
If it's free, it's not worth anything.
But you could assign a value to it and then say, you know what? This is on the house, next time it's whatever, and this shows you value right away.
The way I like to design these things is think of it as a marketing expense. So take someone through your process, tell them, this is what the process looks like. Typically right around here, I would send you an engagement letter and we'd start billing. But I'm deciding to not do that until we get here.
Yep.
Because I want you to see what this is, because I don't want this barrier to entry to be here. I don't want you to get sticker shock. Yep. You don't even know what you're buying. That would be like forcing someone to buy a car without allowing them to test drive it. Yeah.
And on top of that, you want to make sure that they trust you.
Correct.
This is a trust. You're opening up your house to somebody. That's like if you hire let's say a nanny that's staying or an au pair, right? You want to know who this person is that's going to be there and seeing all your intimate little secrets, because that's what happens on the network, right?
Yep.
And before you just hand over the keys, you got to trust the person, right? And it takes a while to build that. And that's why I also think our managed services work so well. Because we
Gives
get
you
in
the
there,
time. Yeah.
we work together, we
Yeah.
talk about processes, we give little tips and tricks, and then, okay, here's this new project I'm thinking about. And all of a sudden, ideas just start flowing.
Yeah.
And once ideas start flowing, you get to innovate.
So I imagine managed IT's first, network engineering second,
Network engineering is very popular.
Yep.
Yeah, very, very
consulting, then automation.
popular. Yes, sir.
I'd like to propose you try to change this a bit for the next person. And honestly, I'm happy to do it with JBS.
Yeah.
Although I've already purchased a couple of these, I really believe consulting should come first.
So that's the reason the company's called Anziani Technology Services and not, managed
IT.
services
Exactly.
in Lawrence or Boston or
Yep.
Andover. Because we don't want to just be a managed service provider.
Yeah. Well, think about where we're going right now. So this is a layman's person. So I pretend to be a finance expert. I am not whatsoever an IT technology expert whatsoever. I'm educating myself as much as possible because it's 2024, and if I don't, I'm going to get left behind. So here's what I see most businesses suffer from a technology perspective. One, especially as they're growing, their tech stack gets out of control.
Yes.
What a tech stack is essentially, to my understanding, an assembly of all of the technologies that you use to operate your business.
Yep.
So for us, that's like Gmail, our tax software, our CRM software, our internal communication software, our banking portals, our accounting portals. Every company is paying like 12 to 20 software providers.
Yep.
And one, they don't audit that ever. They don't see like, are we getting the best value from this? Should we consolidate? Can any of these speak to each other?
Is there a better feature somewhere else?
Is there a better feature? So I see a lot of mistakes there.
And I'll tell you one thing to add to the tech stack. We should say it's the core softwares you use. There's a lot of other pieces of software you may use or an individual in your company uses. We won't consider that part of your tech stack because it's not going to everybody. However, we are aware that those exist because those are serviceable software.
Yeah.
And once you understand what your limits or your minimum viable product is for your business, once you understand that, we can build on top of that with things that are compatible. But you have to know that first.
I love that. That's private equity and venture capital language, right? They don't let a startup begin and they don't give them real money until they have an MVP, a minimum viable product. And essentially there is like, what are you bringing to the marketplace? And then how does your core tech stack, as opposed to the ancillary products, how does that fit that vision?
Yep.
And I'm telling you, I work with thousands of small business owners. Most people have no idea. And I think that's one of the biggest problems.
Yeah, well, they end up evolving over time and not noticing the trail they left behind.
Yep.
And then it'll come to a time where that 10-year-old computer, God forbid, crashes, fails, and they're like, what was that tool? And now you have to think about it.
Yeah.
You know, and as they bring employees on, they're like, we're using this, this, and that. And then the employee has to literally find out little by little, well, we use this tool as well, we need this tool. Then they also build that trail, and nobody has kept a core baseline of here are the products we need. And I found that some clients, where they're paying for stuff they haven't used in years.
Yep.
You're talking about, there's a piece of software, they're not going to stop billing you. If your credit card is still active and it hasn't expired, and you didn't go in there and cancel it, and they make it very hard to cancel the software on purpose.
Yeah, that's the SaaS business model.
Yeah.
Software as a service. So this is my little brain. I've been working with you for almost a year. You just went full time a couple of months ago.
Yep.
I'd like to propose you try something. I'm going to put this in terms of real estate. I do a lot of work in real estate. People love real estate investing.
Yeah, I love real estate investing as well.
I don't love it.
I love it.
I've been giving real estate investment advice to some capacity for the last 10 years. Not because that's what I get paid to do. I'm not an agent. I'm not a mortgage broker. I was a financial advisor. I typically get paid to manage equities, help people build financial plans, buy insurance policies. But I literally had to learn real estate investment because that's all anybody wants to talk about.
Yeah, everybody wants a multifamily that's cash flowing. Come on, who doesn't?
It's crazy. Me, I don't. For a number of reasons, the biggest one being I believe I get better ROI in other places.
Yep.
But that's just me. I think it's just tangible. It's what people know. It's what their family has done. I also think that when people develop wealth, which they typically do from a business, once you have that wealth and you don't know where to put it, that's an easy place to put it.
So I want to go back to real estate. You know how, did I ever tell you how I met my mentor? So I wanted to do real estate because when you're making a little bit of money, you want to,
Yeah, everybody does.
You want to do real
Yeah,
estate.
yeah.
And I took a mastermind, and one day we're talking through the mastermind. I'm like, I'm going to buy some off-market properties. I'm
Yeah.
going to do mailers, And I went to go meet with him at Twins. We smoked a cigar, drank some, we were having a drink. And I briefly told him, I'm like, because I'm consulting and I'm charging, this. He goes, what? Why the hell are you trying to buy real estate? You don't want to change toilets. That's your path to wealth right there, not real estate.
The real estate is, to be honest with you, I work with people who have hundreds of doors, okay? Tens of millions, some probably close to 100 million in equity. Yep. That means after mortgages are paid off, worth of real estate. And you want to know when they bought real estate? After they became successful and they didn't know where to park the money. They don't want to hold the cash.
Yep.
It's a wealth preservation tool. It's not necessarily a wealth building tool until you get to a certain size.
Yeah.
And then once you're at a certain size, I just view it as another business.
Yep.
But the real estate business does not operate as well as people would like you to think when it's small. One duplex is not going to do anything for you. It's not fun. You got a part-time job.
Yep.
One of my favorite things to say, I've written articles about it, there's nothing passive about passive investments.
No.
Okay? The only real passive investment that there is buying a CD or a treasury or a bond and collecting your interest, or buying an S&P 500 index fund and popping more money in there and forgetting about it.
Yep.
Buying a property, having tenants, that's not passive. I don't know why the IRS continues to call it passive income, but it's not passive.
Same reason I sold my first multi.
Yeah.
I was like, this is not
Likewise, I bought one, and I own commercial real estate. I own this building partly and other buildings, but residential, I'm done with forever. It took me one deal. And honestly, my clients convinced me to do it, the ones that are very successful. And I was like, yeah, no, never again. So speaking of real estate, I'm going to give this to you in a real estate analogy.
Yep.
I believe the consulting business has to come first, because if you're developing a house, the architecture has to come first.
Yep.
How can you build a house without blueprints? If I were you, I'd be approaching all of my clients with the first thing we need to do before we do anything, managed services, network engineering, is I need to understand your business, the products you sell, your cost centers, your direct cost. Of course, I'm bringing this from an accounting perspective, but you need to understand how the business functions, and then where does technology play a factor? Where are you using tech? Where are you not using tech? Is there opportunity we're leaving on the table? Are you using outdated tech?
Yeah.
And let's start there. Let's almost like build a blueprint of what the technology needs of this business is. And then we get to things like network engineering and managed services and automation. Yeah. But I think you have to build a blueprint, diagnose the illness before you build some sort of solution around it or a building.
Yep.
That's the way I would approach this. This changes based on your target market. If you're looking at a middle, let's say mid-sized company, 50 to 100 employees, they probably already know exactly what they want to buy.
Yep.
So you don't have to worry about this. So you get in any way you can, managed services, network, whatever the problem is, I'll fix that. Then I'll come back to do the holistic assessment.
Yeah, and that's typically how we approach it. We'll go in, manage services, because most businesses that we're targeting are already established. We're not establishing new businesses from the ground up.
Yeah.
And
but what does establish mean to you?
Established means they have revenue, they're profitable, they already have employees, they have SOPs in place, or standard operating procedures, they have a chain of command, and they have management, they have training. So those are established companies.
Yeah, makes sense.
I would put a revenue number to it, but there's...
No, that's irrelevant.
It's not really...
To be honest, I think the headcount number is way more important for you than the revenue number.
Yeah, and I told you I was in Vegas last week trying to learn a little bit more about this industry because I'm in it, right?
Yep.
And there's a lot of companies that don't take anybody under 100 users.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Under 100 users...
For managed services, that makes a ton of sense to me.
Yep. Because at that point, there's budget, right?
Yeah.
And most companies, I think...
there's massive need.
100%. Most companies are supposed to spend 3 to 8% of their annual revenue.
Yeah, I hate that number.
I know, on IT services and technology in general.
Yeah.
And if you're not spending that, you're usually staying behind.
Yeah.
And there's inefficiencies which are stopping your growth, essentially.
Right.
But it depends how much money you make. That's a big number, right?
Yep. That's a big number, yep. And then here's the problem. When you're doing 100K, 3 to 8K, that's not a big budget for you to work with.
No. But when you're doing, a couple million,
it makes sense.
It sounds like a lot of money to give, right? And then you have the conversation of when do I bring this in-house versus when do I outsource it?
Correct.
And there's not a really good answer to that.
No. To me, I mean, my answer as a client and a business owner is when the budget starts getting above 6 figures, let's call it. Like at that time, I want to know if I hired someone, What else do they have capacity for, and can that be beneficial to the business? But now that comes back to, again, more consulting, project-based, assessment-based,
Yep.
and more automation build-outs. So it's like,
Yeah, that's why I feel like as a business it will never go away, right?
No.
And even though they'll bring in-house, I think about it like this, right? Let's say you get to 6 figures. For you to hire someone with the skill set of where we are right now as a company, you're not going to get them for those 6 figures.
correct.
The industry average is 150 to 350 right there for that type of person. And guess what? That type of person is not going to come in here and start working on your endpoints.
No.
They're going to want to be holistically at top and looking.
And I'm going to have to worry about that person slacking or having to fire them or PTO
Benefits,
or having a baby or benefits or taxes. Yeah.
Yep. And then once you have, the endpoints and the ticketing system, they're going to want to hire someone else. Now you're looking at a $70,000 salary there. So holistically, for you to have an IT department, I think minimum is about $500,000 a year. Budget.
Wow.
Minimum. Think about what you spend on
sense.
equipment.
Yeah. Just building the infrastructure.
Infrastructure plus employees. And all the tools we bring in, you're still going to have to pay for them.
Right.
So you're going to pay for the labor, you're going to pay for the...
Yep.
But why can we do this at a different, at a holistic level for different clients? Most clients have the same basic needs.
Yep.
They have a laptop, they have software they use on them, and they need somebody they can call when things break. That's it. Like you said earlier, if I had someone in-house, what else can they do? And that what else will overtake the responsibilities of only doing the IT. At the point that I walked into JBS and I said, hey, I need some help, was because it was overtaking the business.
Sure.
I couldn't keep up with my books. I was doing it wrong. It was frustrating me at some point. I already saw the value in having somebody do bookkeeping.
Yep. And I guess when we're purchasing, whether we know it or not, the question always is, do I understand the value and what's the price?
Yep.
And when you have those two questions answered, awesome. I think it's easy to make a decision. The problem I think you and I both face, I think a lot of professional services, professionals in that space face, is clients don't understand the value.
Yes.
Sometimes we don't know how to price well, but I think you and I have that covered. The problem for us is clients don't understand the value. And it's our problem to solve, not theirs.
You know what my least favorite thing to do is? When they do understand the value is usually when they're in a crunch. Something happened.
Yeah. Urgency
Very
can make...
urgent. They feel like they're about to lose everything.
Yeah.
Most businesses, after they've been hacked, within a year, they close their doors.
Yeah.
Because they weren't prepared for it. Yeah. They didn't have budget for it.
Their insurance may decline because they weren't prepared for it. No systems in place, no SOPs.
They didn't have cyber insurance. You know the amount of clients I've walked into that don't have it. And what happens is, at that point, they're very vulnerable. And a lot of companies will come in and be like, you know what? Yeah. We got to charge you, how much is this worth to you?
It's like injury attorneys, ambulance chasers, divorce attorneys. It's like, oh, I got you right where I want you. You're going to pay me whatever I want.
Yeah, but then...
That sucks.
It stinks at that point. I don't really want to come in at that point, and I do, and I have for a lot of clients, and we've taken them out of that hole, and we've been very fair with them. But I wish they saw the value before that happened.
Of course. Because
if you do, it saves you a lot more money at the end, and it actually makes you more money.
Yep.
If you wait till you get to that point, and the biggest thing I get is, well, I'm a small company. Why would they be attacking me? They don't care who you are.
Yeah.
They don't know your name when they're doing
this
this stuff.
Valuable data.
All they care about is how much is it worth? How much are you willing to pay if we get into your system?
Yep.
And how easy is it? Because they also don't want to put a lot of effort.
A lot of it is ransom work, right?
Yep. And it's as easy as an email that comes in, and somebody clicks it, opens it, downloads it, you don't have the proper tools in place.
Yep.
Now they're in. And then once they lock you out, if you don't have a disaster recovery plan in place, which people typically are like, what is that? Well, that's how your business is gonna continue if there's ever an issue.
You know what you're selling in this situation is called insurance.
I know.
That's what this isn't definition wise. People don't understand insurance. It's a very complicated tool. Insurance is as old as money, if not older, the concept. Very complicated tool, but it's that thing that you don't want to pay for. And if you need it, you pray to God that you have the right amount, the right coverage. And I think this is just another key. As I'm doing my 2025 budget, as we have this conversation, I'm going to start to bulk in my IT budget with my risk management and insurance budget.
Yep.
Because that's what managed service and network engineering is all about. Yep. So I see that as defense, and then I see like the consulting automation as offense, baby. Yep. And I really think we got to talk more about that space. AI is coming.
Yes, sir. It's not coming, it's here.
That's what, and it's coming hard. It's here, and it's going to continue to come. And I think there's so much potential solutions that especially small businesses can build and leverage
100%.
to just have much better businesses, ideally with a more specialized, smaller team, which for some people hearing this, they might think, oh, well, now that I have AI, I can have less people, which means more profit.
Yep.
The way I like to see it is you get to pay your people better.
Yep.
Right? That's amazing. So AI is going to affect all of this, I imagine. The
100%.
managed services, the engineering, the automation especially.
Yep.
But then I feel like people already are in desperate need of consulting. How does AI benefit my business today?
So we got to first define AI as a tool.
Yep.
It's nothing else but a tool.
So people know LLMs, right? They know large language models. They know ChatGPT, all the good ones. Most people using it in your experience in work?
Yeah. So what I'm seeing now is, and a good friend of mine said this to me, he goes, AI is only meant to bring you from 0 to 50 a lot faster.
Yep.
It's there to do the first initial 50% of the work,
Makes sense.
and then you have to figure out the rest. Because at the end of the day, it's not going to know.
Yep.
And there's only so much context. If you go back and step back a little bit, what is AI? You just said it, LLMs, large language models.
Yeah.
What's a large language model? It's training on algorithms that look at data that's already happened.
Yep.
And based on that data, the training and how long it took, it knows certain things. However, that becomes outdated. The minute you talk, it's outdated. The minute a new article gets published, it's outdated.
Yep.
So that's why it brings you from 0 to 50, even I'll say 70, very quickly. But then you need to do that 30% or that 40% that's left.
I also think that as a population, we're not even considering how amazing this is. People back in the day, I think about the fact that before something like ChatGPT launched, 2021, 22?
It's probably been around a little bit longer than that, but before it became mainstream.
I remember like November 22 maybe, everyone got access to it all of a sudden. Fastest platform to get to 1 million users, right? With no marketing. Crazy. Before that even happened, and we had Google, I used to think to myself all the time, we live in a society where almost every person on earth has access to more wealth and information than every pharaoh from Egypt and every Roman emperor. And they had big jobs that require data analysis, right? Every major job where you have to look for the well-being of a lot of people requires data, because you're not going to be able to talk to everybody one-on-one.
Yep.
And we have access to all this stuff, and we're not doing anything productive with it. Most of us, day to day. Scary.
But the problem with it is too much access is also not as good.
There's no training.
And you don't know what's right, what's wrong, what's real, what's not.
Those emperors, they had advisors with them. They had experts.
And big companies have that.
Yeah,
of course. Working at Toyota, we'll go back to, we built our own chat GPT in-house.
Yeah.
And you just use the models that are underlying, like the Lambda model, for example. We had our own that was trained on our own data.
Yeah.
But that training, the reason why it's so popular, that training takes a long time and a lot of money and a lot of effort.
Yeah.
And the biggest problem right now with AI, and the reason it's kind of stagnant, is hardware. If you think about NVIDIA, I mean, you follow the stock market, NVIDIA's been going crazy, right?
Yeah.
We can't get their chips fast enough to train our models. And a model could take years to train, right?
Sure.
I think ChatGPT 3 took a couple years to train, or the first one took 3 to 4 years to train. It's still taking that long because the data sets get so much larger. Yeah. And now when you move from large language models to video models that are coming out, Toyota right now, if you go on their website and on their page, they're looking at training robots on doing basic tasks. Mm-hmm. And you think about a task like a child learning to walk, you know how hard it is to program that into a robot? And using AI, it's making it easier and it's making it faster, but it's still not where it's at.
Yeah.
And it's going to take a long time. What you have to do as a business is learn the tool and learn where it's going to affect you the most. If you're doing something as simple, I mean, I've gone back into the tool and I've said, all right, I need to do an automation for X, Y, Z. And it comes back with the base code. Yeah. That would have taken me hours. Now the base code is there. I just got to put the final touches to it and get the code out there.
Or, you're talking about, well, I don't know how to develop SOPs.
Yep.
Well, open up ChatGPT, find out what an SOP is, ask it for 50 examples of how companies use it, get a sense of it, and then say, I have this process, let's call it hiring somebody. Can you build an SOP around it? And there's an outline.
And even, let's say now you take it a step further, right? You take that SOP that ChatGPT gave you your special sauce, and now you go to an advisor and say, could you help me with this?
Yep.
Guess how much less you're going to pay that advisor because you already have a starting point.
You got it.
So that's why tools are very important, whether it's for your inventory, for your automation, even for information gathering. Back in the day, I used to say, I have a job because I'm really good at Googling. Now everybody could be really good at Googling with ChatGPT. Just talk to it naturally. You don't have to know the secret little ingredients to Google searching. You just have to ask it like you normally would.
I heard the former CEO, maybe of Microsoft or IBM, one of them for sure, say something like, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, likely sooner, but he likes to be conservative, no one will really need to know programming language anymore. Because the programs will know English or will know French. And you'll just say, this is the website I'm looking to design. And you can do this now a little bit. Or this is the app that I want to design, and go back and forth. And it will, once done and understands what you're looking for, it'll just give you everything you need, where to put it, and your code's done.
So I will go back to that though, right? You said a word, once it understands.
Sure.
It never fully understands yet. And I don't think it will get there either. And the reason it won't get there is the world changes way too fast, and there's not enough ways for that information to get into the internet fast enough to be trained.
By the time it's there, it's already fallen behind.
It's already fallen behind. My professor once told me in college, I was having a hard time in my software engineering 3 class or something like that. And I was like, I really don't get this. And I'm like, he's like, it's not the code. It's not Java. Java only has like 70 keywords that you have to use. You don't understand software engineering yet. And it's like, what do you mean? I'm like, it's the code. I don't know what words. He's like, no, you don't know how to solve the problem. And that's where AI really lacks. It doesn't know how to solve the problem. Whatever you tell it, it's going to give you. It's the same thing with a computer. If you're going to use it to write a Word doc, whatever you type in there, it's what's getting typed. It doesn't know what you're thinking. And people think AI will get to a point where it connects with us. And
No.
I don't think it gets there. No. I personally don't.
I mean, not until we have a chip in our brain, right? But even still, that's still the same feedback. You're giving it something, you're getting some sort of feedback based on what you've given it and nothing else. And
it's all input outputs, right? And we're so complex as humans that we do things subconsciously we don't even know about. So it's going to get there. Not in our lifetime. And I don't think in our children's lifetime either. And we're going to run into a power issue soon.
Of course. Computing power is crazy.
Computing power, and even just literal power. The grids aren't built for it. We were building a...
Well, you know what that means? Innovation.
Innovation around power. They're talking about bringing nuclear back in some places because they need the power. When we build data centers, we think of 3 stages of power. If it takes 2 to 3 months for a training and you lose power, guess what? You lost a month worth of that training. And now your model is and you have to start all over. There's no like checkpoints, and there's very minimal checkpoints.
There's no control S, you can't save.
Nope, you can't save, you can't go back. You're training a model on an algorithm, right? And a lot of people ask Amazon, why is Amazon so profitable? They're just selling that hardware. The cloud is somebody else's computer in a different place. You can be a cloud provider with the infrastructure you have here. Just sell a little bit of your infrastructure to people, right? You just have a layer.
You just don't have enough.
Don't have enough. And neither does Amazon, by the way.
Well, don't have enough to meet demand.
But
they have enough to make money, but they don't have enough to meet demand, which is scary.
And that's a big thing we struggle with as IT providers, right? When do we bring things in-house versus on the cloud? When does it make sense to use Amazon and pay their fees versus bringing it in-house? And once you start doing those analysis, there is a place, but depending on the type of work you do and your SOPs, again, everything goes down SOPs, there's going to be a time where it never makes sense to bring it in-house. But there's going to be a time where it never makes sense to use the cloud.
Interesting. I got to tell you, I think your business is going to do phenomenal things. And we have to talk more about this IT consulting, in my opinion, because a lot of your prospective clients that aren't going to want managed services right away or network engineering, you still want to build relationships. You still want to bring revenue in the door. It's okay to have multiple products with different margins, right, with different acquisition strategies. I just think that's the one that can be relevant to all clients. And I think that one's also the one that's going to allow you to go cross-sell the others. So really for you, same for me and most professional services, it's about how you get that foot in the door so then you can build a relationship, so then you can expand. And the expansion has to be mutually beneficial. It has to make sense. They have to understand the value. It has to seem like an investment. Investments generally generate returns. Back to your photographer client, that's what I call clients for life. When you teach someone based on what you know, how to enhance their business, make money, and scale, because that's a scalable approach, then you ideally have a client for life as long as you learn how to manage the relationship and nurture the relationship. So we have to come back to that. But I think the biggest challenge you're going to face still, I thought I would think differently towards the end of this chat, but I don't. And keep in mind, I feel like I've learned a lot since we started talking. I've been doing my independent research too.
Yep.
And the challenge is going to be people's ability to understand what you know.
Yep.
It's complicated. I get it, right? I know banking, I know investments, I know insurance, I know accounting. Most people will never understand fully all of that. But a lot of them don't care when it's about a tax return or a question as simple as, am I making money or not? If no, why? If yes, why?
Yep.
For you, this is a little bit more complicated in my opinion.
And it takes time.
It takes a lot of time. And it takes the person also educating themselves because technology is moving so quickly. Yep. The fastest probably ever. And at the fastest rate. The velocity of growth of technology is insane. Yep.
And I'll tell you another challenge is rebuilding those relationships people have with technology.
Yeah.
Because there's so many advisors, there's so many consulting companies that are there for growth, and once they acquire you as a customer, they throw you to your tier ones, tier twos.
Yeah.
And it damages the perception of the customer because now they're like, well, we already did this.
Yeah.
And what makes you different? Like, no, they already, they told me the same story or they did X, Y, Z. So repairing that relationship they have with technology and technology providers, that's, I think, the biggest challenge that we really have.
That makes sense. The mistrust that someone else caused that you have to fix.
And that's why a lot of our business has been referral-based, people we know, direct. I work with a director that I know.
That's all professional services though, right? That's how most professional services firms get their clients until they build brand and reputation. Exactly. And brand and reputation means like you're national, people really know who you are. Right. Until then, it's really all referral-based.
And you have to take time to build brand. Brand doesn't build overnight. I can't wake up and say, hey, Anziani Technology Services everywhere. It takes time, takes effort. And it's not always profitable effort. You're not making profit right away.
But again, I like to think of that as marketing expense.
Yes.
So if you're a startup, most startups, especially VC-backed, PE-backed, they know they need to spend $50K a month on marketing to launch the product. Bootstrapped companies like us, when you start a company with your own cash and your own revenues that you need to eat, that's bootstrapped, right? Your best marketing effort is brand building, relationship building, providing value for free to people.
Yep.
And you can build it well, and I think you will build it really well. What I'm most excited about is in a couple of years, hopefully a couple of months, making you a tier 2, tier 1 client.
Coming soon.
Yep, where we can just have this conversation more, right? Because what I like to do is I like to sit there with businesses. First, I like to understand their business well, which I'm starting to get to with yours, and then understand their products well, make sure they're well positioned, well priced, help build a sales strategy around it. What's the value proposition? And then help sell. People don't know that, but CFOs, the good ones, they don't just manage the money. They help more of it come in.
Yep.
Right? You help sell. And sales, we could spend another hour on what sales means. I love sales. I've been doing it for 10 years. But all sales is how do you make this product so valuable that people have a hard time saying no? So let's say you have a good closing rate.
Yep.
You have a process that people can respect and actually go through without falling off in the middle. And then it's just about how do I get this process in front of as many people as possible? Qualify people. So you have to qualify who you're looking to get in front of. But yeah, I think that I have a lot of ideas for you. We'll talk offline about how to increase revenue 50% at least from here to January. And it's all around IT consulting.
100%.
Because what we just talked about right now, I learned a ton about how I want to think about my IT going forward. We're in the process of doing so many things. Forget about buying new laptops and servers. We're in the process of creating an intranet where all of JBS's SOPs, trainings, etc., that all current employees and new employees need to learn, that needs to live in one place very securely.
Yep.
Right? That's something that hopefully will get launched by Q1 next year. I have staff all over the place, in the country, out of the country. We want to make sure that our data is as secure as humanly possible, and we feel very confident about that with Anziani here.
Thank you.
And the next one is, we want to start developing some software products, really for us. JBS is not going to be here to pivot into a SaaS business, software as a service. What we want to do is understand how fast technology is working, how much we use it in our practice, and we use it a lot, way more than most accounting firms. And then how do we build solutions around it where it requires less people so that we can pay our people better, so our people don't spend time on data management and administrative services. And that's all part of a technology strategy.
Yep.
And every small business and large business needs to develop a technology strategy or die.
Yeah, and that's why big businesses do it.
Yeah.
They don't just say, we're not going to spend money on technology. They spend money on technology to grow
Yeah.
and to go to the next level and to empower their employees.
Yeah, 100%. And then who knows, maybe I'll even share some more equity with the rest of the team.
At that point, you know, everybody's going to be happy. Everybody eats.
As long as they understand it. I've shared equity in the past with people who didn't understand what equity was, and that was a mistake.
Yeah.
Won't happen again. Sweet, man. I appreciate the chat.
All right, I appreciate it. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, this was cool.